I don't think it's right.
Yes.
I can't see it on Zoom. Too dark. That's for the people watching at home.
Yep.
Amazing.
Anyway, long story short.
Oh, terrible.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for showing up in person. And so I have a few announcements to make. Tomorrow we have a movie playing here in the auditorium at 2 p.m. It's called Moonlight. It's a 2016 movie. And it's in honor of homophobia and biphobia. And next Wednesday, we have the Librairie Monet presenting new French books. If people are interested in finding out about new French books that are going to be popular or any authors that they like, Librairie Monet will be presenting in the multipurpose room in the children's department, and you have to register online to attend these programs. So I will now leave it over to Mr. Dwoskin so he could present his talk. So thank you for coming in person.
Thank you, Angela. Hi, everybody. I don't know how many of you were coming to these classes before COVID, probably most of you. And I always thought, I'm wondering, you know, Cote-Saint-Luc used to offer a free, those cookies and the tea and coffee. And I said, I wonder if these people are coming for a nice sit down in the afternoon for tea and coffee, or if they're coming to listen to something with current events. Sure enough, you know, there is no tea and coffee now. I don't know the reason, but there isn't any, maybe budget, something, who knows. So I'm glad you all came to listen to current events. And for those of you who are on Zoom out in the world, thank you also for tuning in. One thing that Zoom has allowed is that for people who could be anywhere, absolutely anywhere in the world, to tune in and to listen to whatever they're interested in. And I know for myself, I go on Zoom often to hear lectures that I'm interested in, and the people could be talking in Europe, or they could be in the States, or they could be anywhere. So welcome to all of you who are on Zoom. I know that last week we had like over 50 people, you know, between people here and people out in the world. So it's nice to hear. So I have a few things to speak about this week. One of which was the election in Turkey, which took place 2 days ago. And I would have to say, for people who are of a liberal bent, or for people who are of a democratic bent, it was quite a disappointment, because the preliminary results were that Mr. Erdogan from the AK party, Justice and Development Party, he won 49.4%. And, you know, all you needed is 50% to win. And his main opponent got 44.5%. And the third party guy got 5.2%. Now, you know, it doesn't take many brains to figure out that if you take out the third guy, then it wouldn't take much for Mr. Erdogan to go over the 50% mark in 2 weeks from time, especially considering that the third party candidate was even more nationalistic, even more anti-Kurdish than Mr. Erdogan is. So it's almost sure that 90% of this guy's votes will go over here. And if the turnout is the same, then Mr. Erdogan will win a third term. Why is it disappointing? Why is it all the more disappointing? And that's because the polls were showing that Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu was slightly ahead. So you have to always ask yourself, well, are the polls wrong? Do the people lie to the pollsters? How is it that in a fairly consistent manner, and especially going back to Mr. Trump's only victory in the elections of 2016, that the pollsters got it wrong, and they underestimate the vote turnout for the right-wing or nationalistic candidates. It seems to be a pattern that although with Mr. Biden's election last time, they were fairly accurate, there is a pattern when you look at elections taking place across other democratic countries in Europe and in Israel. The right-wing vote seems to be consistently underestimated by the pollsters. So is this a coincidence, or is this a pattern? And if it's a pattern, why is it? In fact, the pollsters in the last American election, the one which Mr. Biden won over Mr. Trump, they came out to an accurate, fairly accurate prediction only by correcting their preliminary results. By correcting, I mean that what they did was they said, okay, we underestimated Trump's vote last time by 2% or so. Let's just add 2% to Trump's vote this time, and then we'll come out to some sort of a conclusion. In other words, what they did was, because they got it so wrong the previous time, in order not to get it wrong the next time, what they did was they just arbitrarily added votes to Mr. Trump to make up what they would have underestimated the last time, if you understand what I'm saying. So what it means is that they knew this time that their polling was not going to be accurate, and so they artificially added votes to make it come out more accurate. And sure enough, by adding those extra votes to the right-wing candidate, Mr. Trump, they came up with a result which was fairly accurate in the last election. So we still have to ask ourselves, why is it that in this Turkish election, the pollsters got it so wrong? Because clearly they had the second place candidate from the CHP party, they had them ahead of Erdogan. And the answer to the question could be explained by choosing the wrong sample. In other words, the sample that they're choosing is not good, is not accurate. It could be that the people who respond to polls, or better to say people who don't respond to polls, who refuse to answer, are not evenly divided between the two sides. That chances are that people who refuse to answer polls are more likely to be right-wing voters than left-wing voters. I think that's a good explanation. There's another explanation whereby people who respond to the polls lie to the pollsters, and they tell them, I'm going to vote for the center or left wing, when really they're going to vote for the right wing. And in Israeli polls, this has turned out to be accurate. In other words, when the supporters of the Likud party are told, if any pollster ever calls you up, tell them you're voting for the left wing, but really vote for us, in order to screw them up and to make them all the more disappointed, or to make them overconfident, or something like that. So these are all different explanations of how these pollsters could be wrong. But if we delve into the support that Mr. Erdogan has, it's quite strong among the conservative people, among the religious people, among the rural people, and weaker among the educated people, the younger people, the urban people, and the liberal people. And that's how you get to those results. If you look at this map, it's not the world's greatest map, I'll grant you, but this is the Asian part of Turkey. This is the European part, this little section here. This is Istanbul over here, all this big mess here. This is Ankara here, and this is Izmir over here. So you could see the three biggest cities, Istanbul, Izmir, and Ankara, voted for the CHP party, which got votes everywhere, if you notice, everywhere along the coastline of Turkey, to there, and then everywhere in the Kurdish-dominated areas over here in southeastern Turkey, but everywhere else in the whole country, they supported Mr. Erdogan. So again, if you look at it from a geographical point of view, just as if you look at the US, if you just looked at the geography of the US, the vast majority of the area of the US votes Republican. And it's only in the cities that the Democrats win. Well, pretty well that's sort of true. I mean, with some exceptions, that's basically the case. But, and similarly in Turkey, it's all the urbanized and the westernized areas in the west part of the country, which voted for the opposition, and the whole heartland of the country, except for the Kurdish area, voted for Mr. Erdogan. You know what was so remarkable about this first round of elections? You know what the turnout rate, the participation rate, the turnout rate was? 88% of eligible voters. Imagine that. You know, in the US, they barely can scrape over 50% of eligible voters. Canada, we're a kind of in the middle of the Western world, maybe between 70 and 75% of eligible voters turned up. That's our average, which is pretty normal for Western democracies. But in Turkey, they got 88% of the turnout of the voters, which is truly remarkable. Now, when you have second rounds, like they have in France, or they'll have here, the participation rate in the second round is always lower. And that's because people say, well, I made my votes known the first time, I'm not gonna bother going out a second time. Or it could be, for example, like in the case of France, I only wanted to vote for my guy, and I'm not gonna go and bother voting for the other two because I don't like either of them. And so the participation rate usually goes down the second round. But the participation rate, in order for Erdogan to lose this election, a big chunk of his supporters have to not turn out, and everybody who supported the second candidate would have to turn out, and a lot of these guys would have to add their votes to him to win, and it isn't going to happen. So the world can be assured that Mr. Erdogan is going to be in power again, despite the fact that Turkey's economy has suffered because of high inflation, despite the fact that he has shown so many illiberal and undemocratic policies by arresting his opponents. The leader of the Kurdish party in the previous election is now sitting in jail.